Thank you, Mark, and thank you all for the chance to chat with you this morning. I want to spend about 15 to 20 minutes to give a little bit about my background and some of the lessons I've learned throughout life. Hopefully you can learn from some of those anecdotes and stories, and then open it up for your questions. First, a little bit more about me. I grew up in a small town called Poughkeepsie, New York. It's right on the Hudson River. My friends and I are very close. We call it the City of Sin. Not because there's any sin there, but because we always hoped there would be some sin there, because it was basically a farm country. My mom and dad got divorced when I was 3 years old. My dad was a farmer. He was 16, 17 years old, and this company, IBM, came in and started going to local high schools and doing IQ tests. And my dad crushed the IQ test, and so he goes from a farmer going to Ketchum High School, living on 40 acres of farmland, to being a data scientist in 1962. I remember when I was young and my mom told me my dad was a data scientist. I'm like, what the hell is that? Today it's like one of the highest paying jobs in Silicon Valley. So in 1962, if you're a data scientist, you're a pretty rare breed. And ultimately, his success at IBM, he married my mom when they were 20, had my older brother, George, when they were 21, me when I was 23. And then my younger brother, Tom, who's 3 years younger than me, they got divorced right after he was born. So the interesting thing about my mom is that she did not graduate from high school. Her mom died when she was 17. She raised her younger brother. So we went from being on the fast track, IBM executive, 3 kids, beautiful house, to being on welfare, food stamps, and my mom trying to figure out how to raise 3 boys without this guy that took off because things got to his head. The great thing is my mom was a competitive woman, and she figured it out. And she was able to get a beautician's license. She worked her butt off, a couple of jobs, opened up her own shop. And before you know it, in the late 70s, she had tanning beds in her shop. She had workout equipment long before any of these chains started. The great thing for us is that we ended up going to the best public schools in the area. In fact, we didn't go to the schools in Poughkeepsie. We went to the schools in Hyde Park, which is a higher rent district area where all the IBM parents lived. The analogy I'd give you is that Google, if you grew up in the shadow of Google or you grew up in the shadow of Intuit, they attract the best talent in the world. Facebook, they attract the best talent in the world. And what happens when they attract the best talent in the world? The schools get more competitive. The sports teams get more competitive. The academic tracks become better. And so what my brothers and I benefited from was growing up in the shadow of some place like Google. And before you knew it, we were on sports teams with literally the best athletes in the country. And this isn't about bragging, but just to give you a sense of how good our athletic teams were. And we didn't have all these crazy workout facilities and Spartan and all this other crap that exists today. We went outside and played in the playground after school. But in my graduating class, my 5 closest friends, professional hockey player, professional baseball player, Mark gave you my background, professional basketball player. In my class, 340 kids. I'm not done yet. Shot put silver medalist, gold medal rower. In my class. So my mom figured out a way how to put us in a position where we could get to a point that we never otherwise would have gotten to. And that's a big reason why I'm at SoFi, and I'll come back to that in a few minutes. The great thing about being in that school is we had great mentors. Sports was a vehicle to get out to other places outside of the farm country. And I had an opportunity to play college football and college baseball. I ultimately chose West Point for one big reason. It was more than academics. It was about leadership and building a leader. And if you graduated last in your class, you still had a job, and you were known as a leader, no one asked you your GPA. Now, that may sound crazy from a guy that graduated first in his class in mechanical engineering and had a dad that was very intelligent and a mom that was very driven and intelligent. But the reality was, where I came from, people didn't go on to do these types of things that my family, what my family achieved. My friends' families did those things. And so that little bit of insecurity drove me quite significantly and ultimately drove me to go to West Point. And that was what fundamentally changed my life. Because I did become a leader at West Point. I did become more than just a football player and more than an academic student, but truly a leader. And learned a lot from that experience. I did it for 4 years. I loved it. I had something crazy happen to me sophomore spring. I was a fullback on the football team. Went from 8th string on the football team to 3rd string. It was a brutal freshman year. Finally traveled the last game of the year, Army-Navy game. I was a quarterback in high school, and so they moved me to fullback. So I had a huge transition time period. But what ultimately happened was in that spring, I was 2nd string fullback playing a ton, and a bunch of linebackers got hurt. And coach walked up to me and said, "Hey, we need a linebacker, and we think you can play linebacker." And I said, "Coach, I've never tackled anybody in my life. I was a quarterback in high school. I've been a fullback since I've been here." He's like, "We think you'll be good at it." I said, "Okay, I don't really want to play linebacker." And he said, "Well, I'm asking you to play it, and when I'm asking you to step up and take one for the team. So I switched over, and 4 practices later, I was a starting inside linebacker, having never played defense in my life. 4 practices later, spring game, 13 tackles in the first half. Coach tells me I'm done. Great spring. You're a starting inside linebacker. My stepfather comes into the stadium. I see him, and I say, hey, Coach, my dad missed the first half. Can I play one more series? All right, fine, one more series. That next series, I blow out both my ACLs. So here's the good news. I didn't know what that meant. I know that may sound crazy. I didn't know what an ACL was, and I didn't know you didn't come back from ACL surgeries, let alone 2. So our starting free safety at the time, a guy named ONeal Miller, blew out his knee earlier in the spring game. Now, ONeal Miller was a phenomenal football player, one of the best football players in Army football history. If you ever heard of a guy named Howard Cross, who's tight end for the New York Giants, played tight end for Alabama. We played Alabama in the Sun Bowl my sophomore year. ONeal Miller lied about his weight. ONeal Miller didn't weigh more than 159 pounds. He said he was 185 pounds. If you go back and watch that film, he hit Howard Cross in a post pattern, and Howard Cross to this day, if you wake him up in the middle of the night and say, what's the hardest hit you've ever had in your life? ONeal Miller. True story. I've seen him 20 years later, 30 years later, true story. So ONeal blows out his knee. ONeal's sitting across from me in a bed in a hospital room. I'm sitting here. Coach Young walks in, who's our coach. And he basically says, you're done playing football. I'm like, I'm not done playing football. ONeal said he's not getting his knee reconstructed. I'm not getting mine reconstructed. I'm just going to work through this. I'll be back in the fall. And he looks at me and he goes, Anthony, that's just not going to happen. Well, I played that fall, and I played my senior year, and I didn't have my ACLs reconstructed. And it's because ONeal Miller taught me how to fight through something that no one had really done before. And the reason I'm telling you that story is these moments have happened in my life that have gotten to me a place I wouldn't otherwise have gotten to. And so you have to surround yourself by people that inspire you, and people that give you guidance, and people that give you hope, and people that tell you when you're screwed up and when you're making bad decisions. And that's what Bill Campbell was about. And so, that knee injury that I had, those knee injuries that I had, changed my life even more. Yes, I came back and I played football and started my senior year and had 129 tackles and won the awards that Mark mentioned. But I've had 10 knee operations since then, and I've had my neck fused, my C5, 6, and 7, and I would do it all over again. Because the things I learned on the football field, you can't learn anywhere else. The bonds I built, you can't build them anyplace else. You guys know that. But if you're 22, I'm telling you, you'll learn that more and more every year. And if you're 50, you know what I mean. I'm 51 years old. I wouldn't trade any of that for anything in the world. I wear a neck brace when I'm on a plane. I look like an old man. I use the elliptical. I don't run. I don't play hoops anymore. But I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Because the things I've learned, I apply every day at work. So let me spend a few minutes on those things. We had a coach that was a 3-time head coach. He was an assistant coach at Michigan. Bo Schembechler had a heart attack, so he took over as an interim coach. He realized he got the taste of being the leader, so he left, went to Purdue, was the head coach there for a while. Then he left, retired, went to Arizona, retired again, came out of retirement, came to West Point. When he got to West Point in 1983, West Point hadn't won more than 3 games in something like 10 years. He introduced the triple option, which fundamentally changed the faith of me and, frankly, Army football. I was a quarterback getting recruited by West Point, thought I was going to go there and run their wing T. They switched to the option. I wasn't a fast quarterback, I had a strong arm. I switched to fullback. I still wanted to go there, and I went there. But Coach Young had a dramatic impact on not just the program, but the people that he was able to recruit, going back to what happened when I was in high school. And we had some of the best football teams in the history of the academy, and that gave us opportunities we wouldn't otherwise have gotten to be seen and recruited and be able to go to events like this and win awards, et cetera. But that's sort of the benefits. What did he teach us about life that has lasted the test of time? He taught us how to define the critical success factors for an organization. When you got there as a freshman, Coach talked about the culture of the team. I didn't know what culture meant. I was a blue-collar kid from Poughkeepsie, New York. He talked about culture and what it meant to be part of our team, and he defined it by 3 words: pride, poise, team. And he drove it into our heads every day. And then he said to win football games, yes, we have to practice, and yes, we have to have a great culture, but we have to have a strategy. Strategy? What the hell is a strategy? Because if we do these 5 things in a game, we win the game. And he said 5 critical success factors. And I was a freshman sitting there, and I was lost. I'm like, what is he talking about? Like, are we running the wing T, or are we running the triple option? Are we running cover 2 or cover 3? Like, it was like nothing I'd heard in my life. And so then he brought it back to football. He said, we got to win the time of possession. We've got to win the kicking game. We got to win critical situations. We got to win the fourth quarter, and we got to win the mental battle. We do those 5 things, we win every game. Statistically, I've analyzed this throughout college football for the last 20 years. You do those 5 things, you absolutely will win. You do 4 of them, you'll win 80% of the time. You do 3 of them, you'll win 60% of the time. And he drilled them into our heads. And we focused on those 5 things. And I'm going to just spend a quick second about it, then translate it to business when I'm done. So if you go into the fourth quarter and you're tied, and you win the fourth quarter, by definition, you win the game. If you go into the fourth quarter and you're ahead, and you win the fourth quarter, by definition, you win the game. If you go into the fourth quarter and you're behind, and you win the fourth quarter, you had a chance. So the fourth quarter actually is the most critical part of the game, once you get to that point. And you have to put yourself in a position that you have a chance to win it in the fourth quarter, because if you have no chance, then it doesn't become a critical success factor. And so how do you put yourself in a position to win the fourth quarter? Well, you win the time of possession. We are a bunch of 1 step too slow, 1 inch too short, 1 inch not fast enough, quick enough players. We were. That's why we were in the triple option. That's why we were in the slant defense, 50 front, which at the time wasn't that popular. It was more of a 40 front time period. If our defense played more than 20 minutes, the amount of yards we gave up from every minute after 20 minutes in a game doubled. But for that first 20 minutes, we could be as fast as anybody in the country because we had great technique. When an inside linebacker, you're watching a guard in a 50 front, guard down blocks, you go like this. You watch the Ohio State linebacker from the end zone, he goes like this, and then he goes like this. I just made up my 1 step because my first step was the right, and he took 2 bad steps. But he was born with the gift of speed and ran a 4.6, and I was lucky if I ever broke a 5.0. So we knew that we only could have a defense that played 20 minutes. And so we had to have an offense that didn't score quickly, that went 3 yards at a time, and was programmed to run 3 yards at a time and eat the shit out of the clock. So if you win the time of possession, the defense only has to play 20 minutes and can make super things happen. They can drive more turnovers. They can give better ball position. Well, if they give us better ball position and we win the kicking game, then we don't have to go as far down the field and we can score in a shorter period of time per total possession. So you want to score in 8 minutes instead of 12, but you want more possessions. And on and on and on. I can give you analogy after analogy. How does that apply to life? How does that apply to business? Anybody read the book Moneyball by, I can't remember Mike's last name for some reason. Michael Lewis. Anybody read Moneyball? Show of hands. I read Moneyball. I was at Goldman Sachs. I was a first-year analyst there, and I read the book. And what's the critical success factor in recruiting or drafting baseball players or trading for baseball players? In that book, what is the critical success factor, the thing that defines value? On-base percentage, right? Same concept. I read that book, and all of a sudden, I was back to Jim Young. And from that point on, every business I looked at as a research analyst, I said, what is that critical success factor? What does this company need to do to win versus everybody else? And it fundamentally differentiated me versus everyone on Wall Street. Put me on television, #1 research analyst against some other people that were really well known. I came out of nowhere. Because of Jim Young. Because of Jim Young. Because of West Point. And you kind of play that back, and you're like, wow, he got really lucky. And it's 100% right. I got lucky. I surrounded myself. My mom figured out how to surround us with great people. I hung out with great people, people that were better than me, people that could mentor me, people like Bill. And it put me in a position where I built up this knowledge, I built up this character that manifested itself in so many ways, not just the first story professionally that I'll share with you. And so when I looked at eBay, and everyone else looked at eBay, and there were 15 auction companies in 1998, 1999, and no one could figure out who's going to win, I said, oh, it's simple. It's the auction conversion rate. And everyone looked at me and said, that's not very strategic. I'm like, that's not a strategic point. That is a critical success factor point. That is an on-base percentage point. That is winning the kicking game. That's winning the fourth quarter. How do they get the highest conversion rate? Because if eBay and its auctions get the highest conversion rate, guess who gets happy? The seller. The seller sells more things. And guess what happens when a seller sells more things on eBay? They list more things because they make more money. And guess what happens when there's more things listed on eBay? There's more selection. And there's more competition. There's better prices. Guess who gets happy because of that? The consumer. So more consumers come. And all of a sudden, success begets success, and all of a sudden, eBay wins. There was only one auction company left, eBay. Search. 1999, 2000, the internet bubble bursts. Google's still around, competing with this big company, Yahoo. Google's no one. They don't even have $1 of revenue in 1999. How do you figure out who's going to win? Is it Yahoo or is it Google? Is Army going to beat Navy? Are the Oakland A's going to have a better team than the New York Yankees? Critical success factor. What's Google's critical success factor? Click-through rate. That's not very strategic. No, it's not. It's actually an outcome of a strategy. Why is it click-through rate? Well, the things that actually drive value when you do a search is what's the most relevant answer? Who has the most relevant answers? Second, who has the most answers, most comprehensive answers? Third, who does it the fastest? How do you measure all that? Well, did someone click on the results or not? Or do they go to Yahoo and do another search? So click-through rate is the output, the measurement to figure out who's doing all those things well. Well, how do you do all those things well? You create something called the search productivity loop. Sounds a lot more strategic than tactical. Google was smart. They figured we have to index all of the internet. If we index all of the internet, we actually have all the information. That's really critical. If we have all the information, then we have to have an algorithm that sits on top of it to make sure we give them the right information, the right filter. And then we have to do it really fast. And if you go on Google and you do a search, there's actually a clock that shows how quickly the results come back. So again, critical success factors. So Jim Young taught us that. I can apply it to the military. I can apply it to my business. I can apply it to any business. And I've done it my whole life, and it's made a huge difference in my life. And that's because I went to West Point. That's because I had a great coach. It's because I had great mentors, and I had a mom that fought her ass off to get us to a point that we could go to a great school with competitive kids, and it taught us all how to be more competitive and surround ourselves with great people. So that's a little bit of my background, a little bit of what I've learned from West Point, a little bit of what I learned from football. One other thing I want to share with you about football very quickly is offense versus defense. So Coach Sutton, who was the defensive coordinator last year for the Kansas City Chiefs and got fired, he's now a strategy advisor to the coach of the Falcons, was my defensive coordinator. He taught me our defense, this is a true story, in a half hour. Because I had played quarterback in high school, and because I played fullback on scout team for a year and a half, I knew every offense. And he starts explaining the defense to me. I'm like, oh, Coach, yeah, I know that defense, cover two. He's like, well, how do you know? I used to be a quarterback. You used to be a quarterback? Why are you playing fullback? I'm not that fast, remember? It's a joke. And he would go through, and he taught me literally the defense in a half hour. And I started it in 4 practices. Not because I was a great athlete, but because somehow along the way I had all the right positions, all the right experience, and it made a huge difference in my world. So Coach Sutton and I became incredibly close. So Coach Sutton grabs me one day and says, you could be one of our best football players ever, but you have a fatal flaw. And I was like, I know, I'm slow. He goes, you're not slow. He's actually, you're a slow fullback, you're a fast linebacker. And we joke about that to this day. He said, no, you play 99 plays perfectly and 1 play horribly. I'd rather you played 99 plays okay and no plays horribly. And I was confused. I was like, what are you talking about? And so we then had a conversation. He said, in offense, you could fuck up 99 straight plays, no yards, and have 1 great play and win the game. On defense, 99 perfect plays, 1 horrible play, Anthony Noto, and lose the game. And I remembered it like it was yesterday. Duke were winning 16-3. The quarterback at the time for Duke was a guy named Dave Brown. The running back was a guy named Randy Cuthbert. Steve Spurr had been at Duke my junior year, went to Florida my senior year, so now it's senior year. They kicked our ass down in Durham. Our junior year, we're beating them at home 16-3 with, I think it was something like 14 minutes left in the 4th quarter. We lost 17-16. I won't give you all the details and go through it all, but we're on the goal line. I was a student of the game. I had to get that extra step. They were in a formation. They ran 3 plays out of that formation. If the guard does this out of that formation, it's got to be this play. I was 5 yards in the backfield. The sad thing was, Randy Cuthbert was 5 yards into the end zone because I guessed. And he said, you can't guess. You have to know. So one of the things I've taught my company because of that experience is that when you're an entrepreneur and you're competing against other companies that are bigger than you, and there are 4 banks in the United States that account for more than $2 trillion in market cap, SoFi is worth $4 billion. How do we beat a company like that? We have to run fast and hard. We call it blitz scaling. There's a book that Reid Hoffman wrote about it, and it's the exact term that we use at our company called blitz scaling. It's growing really fast and building really fast. What I tell the company is, don't focus on the plays that we didn't do well. Focus on the plays we did well, because we are offense. We're not defense. We're not an orchestra. Put it in another context. In an orchestra, if it's 20 minutes, and the orchestra plays perfectly for 18 minutes, and at 18:01, someone misses a beat, the entire performance is ruined. That's defense. Offense, we only have to get one play right. In fact, we only have to get a couple plays right. So each quarter, we go into the quarter, literally quarters, company quarters, and we have 20 things we need to do. My goal is to get 5 right, not 20, 5 right. Because we only need to get 5 right because we're playing offense, because those 5 things are big things. They're game-changing things. We go after 20 game-changing things. And if everyone focuses on the 15 we don't do, we will not get the 5 done that we need to get done. And so that concept that Coach Sutton taught me about offenses versus defense, I literally talked to my company about in all hands and all the time. Because we got to the end of the quarter, and the 5 things we accomplished in Q2 were phenomenal. The 15 things we didn't get done, did they suck? Yeah. Like, no one wants to get knocked down. We just have to get back up 10 times when you get knocked down 9. And that's what building a company is really about, especially when you're going against big companies. And so that's something else I learned for football. The other thing I want to hit on quickly and open up for questions, I think I'm running over time here, is mission-driven company and culture. And I'll be very quick. The upbringing that I had, my mom not graduating from high school, not having any money, being on welfare and being on food stamps, I thought lunch was free until I got to 7th grade because we were free lunch kids. And I got to middle school and it wasn't free anymore, and I got embarrassed because I had no money. And I went home and said to my mom, we got to pay for lunch. She goes, yeah, you always had to pay for lunch. We got it for free because we didn't have any money. Like, that's from where I came. So when SoFi called me, things were just turning around on Twitter, and it was the hardest job I had in my life. 4 years of really, really grinding work, and the business was just doing well, and I had no intention to leave. And the people on the board at SoFi knew me, and I knew them, and they said, don't embarrass us. At least come and meet with us, and we'll tell you about the company. And I'll tell you one quick part about this, and it will tie into what's driving me and driving my life. And if you ever can combine your passion and your competency, you will love your professional life. And there's a man in a video that basically was crying about SoFi, how SoFi changed his life, how it gave him the economic independence to he and his wife to have children. He was a doctor and she was a lawyer. Think about that for a second. He was crying because SoFi helped reduce their debt so they felt comfortable having children. What world are we living in that you can become a doctor and a lawyer and not have enough money to have children, not be able to buy a house? And that video grabbed me and convinced me that we could make SoFi a mission-driven company. And our mission is to help people achieve financial independence. And if you asked me when I was 14 what that meant, financial independence meant being rich. Today, that means having enough money to do what you want, be able to have kids, buy a house, have the career you want, live where you want. And so the world has changed quite dramatically. That's our mission. We're trying to build the best culture in the world. If you go online, you can do a video of our cultures. I spoke at West Point, the 100th night video. I'm not going to go through all our values. The foundation of the culture we're trying to build is our core values. There's a bunch of core values there that I lived my life by and that I've brought to the company and they've embraced. They're incredibly important to me. One is make your footprint bigger than your foot. Second is run after problems. Don't say that's not my problem. And the third is get to the truth. You can't make the best decisions. You can't be excellent if you don't get to the truth. So those are 3 core values we have as a company, and we're trying to have the best culture in the world. And there's another 8 values that are there for you to read, and you can watch this video and I go through them. The last piece of advice I'll give you is live your life by 3 things, and I've plagiarized these 3 things. The others were mine. First, work as hard as you can. If the other person is as good as you and you work as hard as you can, you'll outwork them and you will win. If you're not as good as them and you outwork them, you will also win, sort of like the 4th quarter. Work as hard as you can. Second is do the right thing. If you're not sure, then you know you're doing the wrong thing. Do the harder thing. Do the right thing. If you're not sure, do the harder thing. And if you have to ask yourself the question, it's generally the wrong thing. And then last, take care of other people. So make your footprint bigger than your foot, run after problems, get to the truth, instill that in your company and your employees, and you'll have a great culture. And then individually work as hard as you can, do the right thing, and take care of other people. So I've learned a lot from a lot of different people. Bill's had a huge influence on a lot of people's lives. It's a great intersection of football and athletics with leadership, with culture, and strategy. And so all of you are at different points in your career, and I will tell you, if you can learn anything from me, then I've delivered to you what I wanted when I sat in your seat, which was someone to tell me everything they could about what it took to get to where they are. So I'm available for you anytime. My email is anthony.noto@gmail. It's pretty simple. Just put in the subject, Bill Campbell, and you'll get a response from me. It won't happen right away, but I promise you I'll get back to you, and We'll find a way to either converse through email or on the phone. It's you have to give back, and there are a lot of times where I didn't know which direction to go or who to go to, and if I was able to have someone like Bill through my whole life, I think it would have made some of the decisions I made a lot easier. I gave you all the positives. I play offense, not defense. I didn't tell you about the 15 things I fucked up, and there were plenty of them. So anyway, take a few minutes for questions, Mark.
Yes, sir. That's great. When you look at SoFi as well as your personal life, what are your critical success factors for you?
Number one is culture. When we look for candidates, the recruiters, our team says, what are the job specs? What are the characteristics? First thing I always say is leadership. We're not going to hire someone at the company that's that's at executive level, that's a bad leader. Has to be a great leader. Second, they have to be a great culture carrier. And then we talk about the individual functional competencies. And so first and foremost, it's about the people. Like there's a saying, the ships don't sail, the tanks don't roll, and the planes don't fly without the people. So it's all about the people. And so if you recruit the best people and you build the best culture, then the best people will be working in an environment that they love. Mission-driven is really important. You have to buy into our mission. If you don't believe in it, you're not passionate about it, you're not going to come to work every day. If we can't tie your personal and professional goals to our goals as a company, you will not be as motivated to do your best work every day. You won't want to do the three things I mentioned as a company or as an individual. So those are the things that we focus on. Strategically, our critical success factor is driven by a strategy called the Financial Services Productivity Loop, which is we have to have the best unit economics in everything we do. So we give out a loan, we have to have the best variable profit. When we do a money account, we have to have the best variable profit. Now, there's a lot of things that go into that, but that variable profit is our on-base percentage. That's our fourth quarter. If we have the best variable profit, we can reinvest at a higher rate to give better services and better products. If we have the best variable profit, we can have the lowest prices, the best selection, all the things that drive consumer choice. And so we focus on critical success factors. And we also focus on something I talk about called inputs versus outputs. And so what's the inputs that drive those outputs? What's the inputs that drive click-through rate? What's the inputs that drive highest auction conversion rate? Yes, sir.
You spoke about your dad and how in the 60s he was a data scientist, which was probably very different from what the masses were doing back then. Can you think of a time in your life when you did something completely opposite of what most people were doing and a positive outcome of that?
I can, but it wasn't by choice, it was by accident. So when I blew out both my knees, the downside of that story was after we played Army Navy my senior year, in January, I couldn't go in the Army without having my knees reconstructed. I had my left knee reconstructed in April, had my right knee reconstructed. This was 1991. So it was during the first Gulf War called Desert Storm. All of the Army doctors, my football doctors, were in the Gulf, and so we had civilian doctors doing the physicals. So I walked into my physical for my commissioning physical on crutches, and I hadn't run since the Army Navy game. And so I got disqualified for being a commissioned officer. And so I applied for a waiver. I didn't go to West Point to be an officer. I went to West Point to become a leader, have a great education, play football and baseball. Being an officer was part of that. It wasn't a desire, it was a responsibility and an obligation, one I fully embraced. And I didn't feel like I could leave having played for 4 years and got a great education and not give back. So I applied for a waiver. The downside of that was I couldn't go combat arms. Combat arms is infantry, armor, field artillery, the people that fight the battle. Think of it as the offensive line, the defense, not special teams. So they came back and said, okay, you can be an officer, but you can't play offense or defense, you're on special teams. So I had to pick a non-combat arms branch, which is a support branch, things like logistics and finance and military intelligence and engineering, and something called the Signal Corps, communications. So I was literally in the hospital bed and had complications, so I was having another surgery, and I had to pick, and I was there with my now wife, Kristen, and I was on morphine, ironically enough, because of the pain, and I had to decide. And literally she said to me, she goes, well, what will create more options for you? And I said, oh, that's easy, the Signal Corps, the communications, it's all over. Military intelligence, no one hires military intelligence officers, but Signal Corps, communications is around the world, so I picked communications. And that unfolded a series of events, and by the way, all my friends made fun of me. They're like, I'd walk in the locker room because I stayed on as a GA, graduate assistant football coach, and because I had to get back in shape before I could actually go out to the Army. And so I'd walk in the locker room, there'd be standing there with 2 flags on my locker. The flags are in the early days of Signal Corps, before there were radios, you used flags to signal, start the attack, end the attack. So it was no one went Signal Corps. But it ended up changing my life because that's where I learned about the internet. That's where I learned about technology, and that's how I became a internet research analyst. That's how I became the person deciding is eBay the winner or Google's the winner. So I took a lot of shit for a lot of years, and when I finally told my friends, how I got these other jobs, they're like, damn, we should have followed you. And I'm like, the irony is it was pure luck, and thank God my wife said, what gives you more options? So.
One last question.
Sure. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, sometimes when you're goal driven, like you feel like you're lost. My question is how did you stay focused when like you felt like you had you just didn't know where to go next? But you're goal driven, you just don't know where to go next.
I'd go back to those three things. My brother George is 2 years older than me. His daughter's here right now at the softball camp, and his older daughter has anxiety, and one of my daughters has bad anxiety, and our mom had really bad anxiety, and he's bipolar. He's on lithium, and we're literally talking this morning about this, and he said to me, Mom was right. She wasn't right about a lot of things, and she cut corners on a lot of things, but she was a hard worker. But whenever I was depressed, he didn't know he was bipolar until he was 40. He said, I never knew what depression was. I always would just say I felt tired. And what my mom would tell him is, work harder, go find something to do, go get a new job. And so I give you that example because that's what led to my three things. Work as hard as you can, do the right thing, and take care of other people. I didn't share this with you. My younger brother passed away September of last year, and he was lost, and a lot of bad things happened. But every time he'd call me when he was down and he had the problem, like, Tom, it's simple, it's three things. Work harder, do the right thing, take care of other people. If you do those three things, you're gonna be great. So I always go back to those three things. And the awards, the titles, all those things, they mask the problems. We all have problems. But if you go back to those three things, they're grounded, they're simple, and we can all do them. We don't need money, we don't need a degree, we don't need technology. Those three things are completely ownable by each one of us. And if you do that, it'll help you get back on track. I firmly believe that. Well, thank you all very much, and thank you, Mark.